What if I told you that for 40 years, the United States government deliberately allowed hundreds of men to suffer and die from a preventable disease, all in the name of science? What if I told you these men were never told they had this disease, were never given treatment that could have saved their lives, and were instead fed lies about bad blood while doctors watched them deteriorate? This isn't the plot of a dystopian thriller. This is the true story of one of the most shameful chapters in American medical history. In the heart of Alabama, in a time when segregation ruled the South and African American lives were considered expendable, a medical experiment began that would span 4 decades and fundamentally change how we think about medical ethics forever. The year was 1932, and the Great Depression had brought devastating poverty to the rural South. In this environment of desperation and inequality, government doctors arrived in Macon County with promises of free health care and hot meals. But these promises were built on a foundation of deception so profound that it would take a whistleblower's courage 40 years later to finally expose the truth. The men who lined up for what they believed was free treatment for bad blood had no idea they were about to become unwitting participants in one of history's most unethical medical studies. The Tuskegee Syphilis study, as it came to be known, didn't begin with evil intentions. At least, that's what the architects of this nightmare would have you believe. The study emerged from the Rosenwald Fund's efforts to demonstrate that treating syphilis in rural African American populations was both possible and cost-effective. This initial effort, conducted in the late 1920s, had shown promising results in treating syphilis among African Americans in several southern states. But when the Great Depression hit and funding dried up, the Public Health Service saw an opportunity that would haunt American medicine for generations. Instead of continuing to treat these populations, Dr. Taliaferro Clark and his colleagues decided to study what would happen if they simply observed the natural progression of untreated syphilis in African American men. The location they chose was Macon County, Alabama, home to the Tuskegee Institute. This wasn't coincidental. The area had one of the highest rates of syphilis in the nation, with some estimates suggesting that over 35% of African American men in the county were infected. The poverty was crushing. Medical care was almost non-existent, and racial segregation meant that African American voices carried little weight in challenging authority. Dr. Raymond Vanderleer, who took over the study from Clark, saw these conditions not as a humanitarian crisis requiring intervention, but as perfect laboratory conditions for observing disease progression. The cynicism embedded in this decision cannot be overstated. These doctors looked at a community in desperate need of medical care and saw research subjects instead of human beings deserving of treatment. The recruitment process was a masterclass in manipulation and exploitation. Public Health Service doctors, working with local African American institutions, including Tuskegee Institute, began recruiting men for what they called a study of bad blood. The term bad blood was deliberately chosen because it was already used in African American communities to describe various ailments, including but not limited to syphilis. 600 men were ultimately enrolled in the study. 399 had syphilis, while 201 served as a control group without the disease. But here's the crucial detail that transforms this from a legitimate medical study into a crime against humanity. None of the men were ever told they had syphilis. Instead, they were told they were receiving free health care for bad blood, a condition that was described in vague terms that could mean almost anything. They were promised free medical examinations, free transportation to and from the clinic, hot meals on examination days, and most significantly, free burial insurance. For men living in desperate poverty during the Great Depression, these incentives were irresistible. The deception ran even deeper than simply withholding the diagnosis. The men were subjected to painful lumbar punctures, a procedure where a needle is inserted into the spinal canal to extract fluid. This dangerous procedure was presented to them as a special free treatment for their bad blood, In reality, it was purely diagnostic, designed to help researchers track the progression of neurosyphilis, the stage of the disease where syphilis attacks the nervous system. The level of manipulation involved in getting men to submit to these lumbar punctures reveals the calculated nature of the deception. Researchers sent letters to participants describing the procedure as a special treatment, using language designed to make men feel privileged to receive it rather than understanding they were guinea pigs in a medical experiment. As the years passed, the study took on a life of its own within the public health service bureaucracy. New doctors joined the project, and established researchers continued to oversee it. But the fundamental ethical violation at its core was never questioned. Papers were published in medical journals detailing the findings, with researchers describing the unique opportunity they had to study untreated syphilis in a population that remained unaware of their condition. The timing of this study makes its ethical violations even more egregious. By the early 1940s, penicillin had been discovered and proven highly effective in treating syphilis. This was not an experimental treatment with unknown side effects. This was a cure, readily available and well understood by the medical community. Yet when penicillin became the standard treatment for syphilis, the Tuskegee researchers made a conscious decision to withhold this life-saving medication from their subjects. They went to extraordinary lengths to ensure that the men in their study would not accidentally receive treatment from other sources. They contacted draft boards during World War II to ensure that participants who were called for military service would be excluded from the antibiotic treatment that was standard for all inductees. They worked with local doctors and health departments to create a network that would prevent study participants from receiving syphilis treatment anywhere in the region. This wasn't passive observation of a natural disease process. This was active prevention of treatment for men who could have been cured with a simple course of antibiotics. The psychological impact on the participants and their families was devastating. Men watched their health deteriorate, experienced the painful symptoms of advancing syphilis, and passed the disease to their wives and children, all while believing they were receiving the best medical care available to them. The trust they placed in the medical professionals who examined them year after year was not just betrayed, but weaponized against them. Wives contracted syphilis from their husbands, not knowing that their infections could have been prevented. Children were born with congenital syphilis, suffering lifelong disabilities and health problems that were entirely preventable. The researchers knew this was happening, documented it in their records, and continued the study anyway. The study might have continued indefinitely if not for the moral courage of one man. Peter Buxton was a public health service investigator who first learned about the Tuskegee study in 1966. Unlike his colleagues who saw the study as a valuable source of data, Buxton immediately recognized it as profoundly unethical. Buxton began raising concerns within the public health service, arguing that the study violated basic principles of medical ethics and human decency. He was told that the study was too valuable to stop, that stopping it would waste decades of research investment, and that the men were too uneducated to understand the implications of treatment anyway. These responses only strengthened Buxton's conviction that the study had to be exposed. For 6 years, Buxton fought within the system, trying to get the Public Health Service to end the study voluntarily. He attended meetings where officials discussed the study's continuation, listened to researchers dismiss ethical concerns, and watched as the medical establishment closed ranks to protect what they saw as valuable research. Finally, in 1972, Buxton realized that internal pressure would never be enough. He made the courageous decision to contact Jean Heller, a reporter with the Associated Press. Heller understood immediately that this was not just a medical story, but a profound human rights violation that demanded public attention. On July 25, 1972, Heller's story broke on the front pages of newspapers across America. The headline was simple but devastating: syphilis victims in U.S. study went untreated for 40 years. The public reaction was immediate and intense. The story revealed that men had died from syphilis and its complications when they could have been saved with penicillin. It exposed the deliberate deception involved in recruiting and maintaining participants. It showed how researchers had actively prevented participants from receiving treatment available elsewhere. Most shocking of all, it revealed that this had been going on for 40 years, through multiple presidential administrations, with the full knowledge and approval of government health officials. The public outcry was unlike anything the medical establishment had experienced. Civil rights leaders, who were already fighting battles on multiple fronts during the height of the civil rights movement, saw the Tuskegee study as emblematic of the broader systemic racism that African Americans faced in all aspects of American society, including healthcare. Senator Edward Kennedy held congressional hearings that brought the full scope of the study's ethical violations into public view. Witnesses testified about the deliberate deception, the withholding of treatment, and the callous disregard for human life that had characterized the study from its beginning. The hearings revealed that oversight mechanisms that should have protected research participants simply didn't exist. There were no institutional review boards, no informed consent procedures, and no external monitoring of long-term studies. Researchers had been left to police themselves, and they had failed catastrophically. Within months of the story breaking, the study was finally terminated, but the damage was done. 28 men had died directly from syphilis. 100 had died from complications related to syphilis. 40 wives had been infected, and 19 children had been born with congenital syphilis. These numbers represent not just statistics, but individual human tragedies that were entirely preventable. The legal response was swift, but could never truly compensate for the harm done. In 1974, a class action lawsuit resulted in a settlement that provided financial compensation to participants and their families. The settlement included $9 million for participants and affected family members, as well as guarantees of free medical care for life. But the most significant impact of the Tuskegee study's exposure was on medical research ethics. The revelation of this 40-year deception triggered a complete overhaul of how medical research is conducted in the United States. The National Research Act of 1974 established institutional review boards at every institution conducting federally funded research. These boards are required to review all research proposals involving human subjects, ensuring that participants understand what they're agreeing to, and that the potential benefits of research outweigh the risks. The principles of informed consent became central to all medical research. Participants must now be told exactly what researchers are studying, what procedures they will undergo, what risks they face, and what benefits they might receive. They must be told that they can withdraw from any study at any time without penalty. The Nuremberg Code, developed after World War II in response to Nazi medical experiments, was finally implemented in American medical research. This code established that voluntary consent of human subjects is absolutely essential in any medical experiment, a principle that had been completely ignored in the Tuskegee study. But perhaps the most important change was cultural. The exposure of the Tuskegee study forced the medical community to confront the reality that researchers could not be trusted to self-regulate when it came to ethical treatment of research participants, particularly those from vulnerable populations. The legacy of the Tuskegee study extends far beyond changes to research protocols. It fundamentally altered the relationship between African American communities and the medical establishment, creating a deep and lasting mistrust that persists today. This mistrust has had profound public health implications. African Americans continue to have higher rates of preventable diseases, lower rates of vaccination, and greater reluctance to participate in clinical trials that could benefit their communities. When researchers wonder why African American participation in medical research remains low, the answer often traces back to Tuskegee. The study also highlighted the intersection of racism and medical research in ways that continue to resonate. The researchers' assumptions about African American men, that they were too ignorant to understand informed consent, too promiscuous to be trusted with knowledge of their condition, and too expendable to deserve life-saving treatment, reflected broader societal attitudes that extended far beyond medicine. Recent events have shown how the legacy of Tuskegee continues to influence public health crises. During the COVID-19 pandemic, vaccine hesitancy in African American communities was frequently attributed to memories of Tuskegee, demonstrating how historical medical abuse continues to impact contemporary health outcomes. Medical schools now teach the Tuskegee study as a central case in bioethics education, ensuring that future doctors understand both the specific violations that occurred and the broader principles of respect for persons, beneficence, and justice that should guide all medical practice. The study also changed how we think about research with vulnerable populations. Special protections now exist for prisoners, children, pregnant women, and economically disadvantaged individuals. Protections that might have prevented the Tuskegee study if they had existed in 1932. International medical research has also been transformed by lessons learned from Tuskegee. When American researchers conduct studies in developing countries, they must now meet ethical standards that were absent during the Tuskegee era, including community engagement, local approval processes, and equitable distribution of research benefits. The men who participated in the Tuskegee study were not volunteers in any meaningful sense. They were victims of a system that valued scientific curiosity over human dignity, that prioritized research data over human lives, and that saw African American men as expendable subjects rather than people deserving of respect and care. Their suffering was not inevitable. It was the result of deliberate choices made by educated professionals who knew better but chose institutional convenience over moral responsibility. Every day that the study continued after penicillin became available was a day when researchers chose to let men die rather than admit their study was unethical. The Tuskegee Syphilis study stands as one of the most shameful episodes in American medical history, but it also represents a turning point that made modern medical ethics possible. The courage of whistleblowers like Peter Buxton, the persistence of journalists like Jean Heller, and the outrage of a public that demanded better created lasting changes that continue to protect research participants today. The story of Tuskegee is not just about medical research gone wrong. It's about power, racism, and the human capacity for both cruelty and moral courage. It's about how institutions can become so focused on their own priorities that they lose sight of their fundamental obligation to treat all people with dignity and respect. Most importantly, it's a reminder that the price of ethical research is eternal vigilance. The protections we have today exist because people were willing to speak up when they witnessed wrongdoing, even when it was dangerous or professionally costly to do so. The men of Tuskegee deserved better than they received from the medical system they trusted. We honor their memory, not just by remembering their suffering, but by ensuring that the ethical standards born from their tragedy continue to protect vulnerable people from exploitation in medical research. The Tuskegee study ended in 1972, but its lessons remain as relevant today as they were 50 years ago. In a world where medical research continues to push boundaries and explore new frontiers, the ghosts of Macon County, Alabama continue to remind us that scientific progress can never come at the expense of human dignity.